Okay, folks, I'm 60-plus-year-old heterosexual male, married to a heterosexual woman. Love my wife. Love my wife. And love what we do with each other. No ifs, ands, or buts. Wouldn't have it any other way. That being said, I am also for people feeling comfortable doing what they're doing. Now, this transgender law that North Carolina, the state of North Carolina, put in is a bunch of bullshit. I've said it before, I'll say it again. This was a law looking for a problem. Now, the governor is a liar, and he's backtracked on several social issues in his state, and hopefully the attorney general that's running against him in the coming election is going to beat his ass. But this governor and this legislature, in the dead of night, within 24 hours, passed this bullshit law. And they called a special session of their legislature to do it. Well, the fallout is raining right now, and they claim that they didn't go out seeking this, but they absolutely did. They could have left Charlotte, North Carolina alone when Charlotte drafted laws to protect the LGBT and in particular the transgender community. But being holier than thou, raising their Bibles or whatever, and if it wasn't Bibles, their own sensibilities high over their heads, they decided to attack a group that doesn't have a lot of protection. Now, the federal government is basically going to go after them, and we all know who's going to win this fight. It's going to be the feds. No ifs, ands, or buts. They don't get into these types of fights without pretty much knowing who's going to win. My issue here is that the black community is often labeled as homophobic, and that couldn't be further from the truth. We're a people that believe in live and let live. You don't mess with me, I don't mess with you, and we all go on about our business. My problem with the administration is not on this, but on the fact that they've chosen this to jump in with both feet, where there are so many other issues, especially issues that affect the black community, that they give lukewarm response to. Now, President Obama recently gave a speech this past Saturday where he referenced the Black Lives Matter movement. Well, hell, he should have been on this, 7 years ago. But now, he's within, 7 months of leaving office, and now all of a sudden he's deciding that he wants to start not even addressing black issues, but properly referencing black issues. Anyway, I'm digressing. Let's get back on to this LGBT situation. Loretta Lynch gave a powerful speech, and I got a video up online with pretty much just her speech in support of the LGBT or transgender community, and there is absolutely no rebuttal that the state of North Carolina is going to make that will be successful. So anyway, this video clip is basically going to let you know what at least a segment of the black community actually believes. And again, we have so little black media here that you're basically going to have to take the word of this particular outlet to I guess render an opinion on how we basically feel about this situation.
The Obama administration is bypassing Congress by attempting to rewrite the law and set basic restroom policies.
We are seeking a court order declaring HB2's restroom restriction impermissibly discriminatory, as well as a statewide bar on its enforcement.
Big fight between North Carolina and the federal government. That was North Carolina Governor Pat McCrory, as well as Attorney General Loretta Lynch, battling out in news conferences on yesterday. The governor is officially suing the Obama administration over a state law limiting public restroom access for transgender people. The so-called bathroom law, which is properly known as HB2, passed in March and prohibits people from using public restrooms not corresponding to their biological sex. The federal government not backing down. They say, well, in their lawsuit, that this is wrong. In fact, it violates the Constitution. The U.S. Justice Department filed their complaint asking a federal district court in North Carolina to declare that the state is violating the 1964 Civil Rights Act and order the state to stop enforcing the ban. Now the two sides are having a battle of words.
So this is not just a North Carolina issue. This is now a national issue, and an issue which imposes new law on every private sector employer throughout the United States of America with over 15 employees. Ultimately, I think it's time for the U.S. Congress to bring clarity to our national anti-discrimination provisions under Title VII and Title IX.
None of us can stand by when a state enters the business of legislating identity and insists that a person pretend to be something or someone that they are not, or invents a problem that does not exist as a pretext for discrimination and harassment. And let me speak now directly to the people of the great state, the beautiful state, my home state of North Carolina. You have been told that this law protects vulnerable populations from harm, but that is just not the case. Instead, what this law does is inflict further indignity on a population that has already suffered far more than its fair share.
North Carolina is already paying a price for standing by the law, losing an estimated $200 million in revenue from canceled events. Plus, Attorney General Loretta Lynch says the government can curb funding to North Carolina's Department of Safety, as well as the University of North Carolina. Joining me on FaceTime in Washington, D.C. to help break down the lawsuit is Paul Butler, a professor with Georgetown University of Law, of course, still on our panel, Quentin James, Angela Peoples, and Paris Chenard. Paul, this battle back and forth between North Carolina, Department of Justice, who has the leg up here, DOJ or North Carolina?
You know, this is a very dramatic confrontation between the state and the federal government. It's states' rights versus civil rights. And, you know, Roland, we've seen this before. This recalls the old-fashioned battles for school desegregation. And what the Attorney General said yesterday is that history tells us who wins these battles. When you have a law that is specifically designed to make a group feel less than, to discriminate against them, in the long run, that side always loses. So history and the law are ultimately on the side of the transgender community. Now it's going to be a battle to get there, in part because this category, transgendered folks, they're not actually named in any of the civil rights laws. So the Obama administration's interpretation is that since sex discrimination is outlawed by the Civil Rights Act, discrimination against transgender people is the same as sex discrimination.
So AG Lynch invoked Jim Crow in her news conference on yesterday. And when you talk about what is not in the law, well, it also sounds like this is likely going to be one of those decisions that will go all the way to the Supreme Court because not only do we have North Carolina, Georgia had a similar law, Mississippi has passed a law, and other states in the South are also considering similar laws.
You know, and Roland, I don't think this is going to be a hard case for the Supreme Court. They've actually been receptive to LGBT rights. Some would say more receptive to those arguments than they have to racial justice arguments. But, you know, and even some of the conservative justices like Justice Kennedy are on board. So I think the issue is going to be what happens in the short term. And for that, think $4 billion, because the Obama administration has the power of the purse string. So they're threatening to withhold federal funds. If you're thinking about things like Pell Grants, again, the University of North Carolina gets $4 billion a year from the administration. So is that going to make them change? fast, quick, and in a hurry? You bet it is. Even quicker than the Supreme Court would make them change.
All right, Paul Butler, was really appreciative for breaking it down for us. Thanks a lot.
Great to be here.
Paris Chenard, is it fair for the Department of Justice to use Pell Grants or government funds for students at UNC or other state schools, even HBCUs, to go after the governor of North Carolina?
Well, I think the bigger issue is that the Republican head of the UNC system, Margaret Spellings, former Secretary of Education, already said she's going to abide by federal law. So she's put her stake in the sand and said what she's going to do on behalf of the UNC system, which is abide by the federal law, not the state law.
The governor here is not backing down. Your Republican legislature as well actually passed a law here.
You know, there's a growing wing in the Republican Party who believes that the government should just stay out of the bedroom, and I think it's going to extend to the bathroom, because it's just these things. There are really no-win arguments, and they really just don't. There are bigger issues at stake for us to be focusing on, things like who can and who cannot utilize restrooms.
But the reality is more states are passing the law, so it's not like this is a one-off.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hear often that there's a wing of the Republican Party that doesn't believe all of the things that the Republican legislators and leaders are actually passing and implementing in states and on the national level. But I do just want to take a moment to say how meaningful and incredible that Loretta Lynch's Attorney General Loretta Lynch's statement was yesterday. Not only is this action absolutely in line with her powers as Attorney General and exactly what the federal government should be doing when there are states that are trying to legislate folks' rights or civil rights away from them, but this moment is really we've seen for the first time really the Obama administration speaking about how they feel and how they view the transgender community, and really putting transgender identities in line with the need for protection against discrimination that we've seen against marginalized communities throughout our country's history. And so this is, I really want to underscore how important this is, and also just name that HB2 is a bill that impacts much more than just whether or not transgender people can use the bathroom that aligns with their identity. So this bill...
All right, in case you guys didn't know it, HB2 also includes a feature that prohibits the increase of the minimum wage above the $7.25 minimum wage currently in force by the federal government. So, translation, that means that if Charlotte decided that it wanted to increase its minimum wage to $11 or $12, that law legally prohibits them from doing so. They slipped that little tidbit in as a sweetener.
Have lots of different impacts in it as well.
Like you, Angela, I'm really just reminded of President Obama's speech on Saturday at Howard University when he talked about this tie that binds us together as African Americans, this understanding of discrimination and how we have to be leading. And so seeing the first African American woman Attorney General leading the federal government's response on this issue, seeing Reverend William Barber in North Carolina with the NAACP leading on this issue to push back, I think as the African American community, our voice is also known of where we stand and what we're going to do to push back on this.
You know, I would love to hear the administration, just to your point, speak out so passionately and so publicly on other issues like the DC Opportunity Scholarship Program or supporting, you know, HBCU funding and things like that. It seems to me that the administration picks and chooses when they want to really focus the attention of the nation on certain things, and I think...
Now, on this, he is 100% absolutely right. I mean, I kind of like the guy. You know, he's wrong on quite a few things, and he does get his butt kicked by Roland Martin quite a bit. But on this one, on this particular issue, he's right. The federal government picks and chooses their spots where they want to bring down their full weight. And as far as I'm concerned, they pick and choose their spots as far as LGBT rights a hell of a lot more than they pick their spots for racial equality rights and voting rights. So, you know, maybe it's not publicized as much. I could be wrong, but it damn sure doesn't, you know, I damn sure don't see a whole hell of a lot of powerful speeches regarding the voting rights side of it and racial equality rights. So I'm with Denard on this.
Just like this is an important point, an important moment in history for the country, and that they're doing, and that he could also do the same thing for other issues that really have a direct impact on our country.
Well, and are a number of African Americans who have made the point, and I've seen it, whether it's scholars or even folks even in social media, that they believe that the administration has been far more aggressive on LGBTQ issues than they have African Americans. Angela, real quick.
Well, I just say I think that there's also an opportunity for the president to go even further if he's coming out as an advocate for transgender folks. There's a lot of work that he needs to do in order to curb detention, incarceration, and profiling, criminalization of this transgender community. These are also issues that are having a disproportionate impact to our folks, and I think that the president can and should take this initiative to go even further to protect folks like the transgender community.
Folks, coming up.
All right, so they basically said it. Obama looks like he's half-assed coming out of the closet. He should have been coming out of the closet from at least January. Actually, I understand politics, and I know that where he was coming from, and he probably didn't want to jump out of here with both feet in his first administration, but in his second, after he got reelected, he should have came out of his shoes about all of these social issues, especially for the black community. So it looks like, he held his fire until 7 months before his administration ends in order to start getting into these things. And in my opinion, he still hasn't jumped into the issues that the black community is suffering to my satisfaction. But he's got 7 months, so I guess we'll see.